Funding for the Maddy Report is made possible by grants from BNSF Railway, moving our economy for 160 years. Harris Ranch Resort, providing Western hospitality and award-winning cuisine. The Wonderful Company, committed to growing a better world. Comcast, connecting people to the moments and experiences that matter most. Producers Dairy, nourishing one life at a time. The Spencer Family. And Fresno State Associated Students Incorporated, students serving students. The Maddy Report is also made possible thanks to contributions from Cook Land Company, E&J Gallo Winery, the Fresno Association of Realtors, and California Manufacturing and Engineering Company. From the Maddy Institute, the Public Policy Institute for the Valley's 4 public universities, this is the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Blake Zante.
Welcome to the Maddy Report. I'm Blake Zante, Executive Director of the Maddy Institute and host of the Maddy Report. Today we're talking with Congressman Tom McClintock, who represents California's 5th Congressional District. Congressman McClintock, thanks for joining us on the program.
My pleasure,
today.
Blake. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
I know before we sat down, you mentioned that you actually had a story about Ken Maddy.
Well, I was actually Republican County Chairman in Ventura County back in 1979, and one of my first tests was to put together a group of volunteers to come up and campaign for Ken Maddy in his special election for the state Senate against John Thurman, and I believe that was 1979. We put together 2 buses. One of them broke down in Delano, and it was a close election, so everybody came away feeling that they had really accomplished something. It was a lot of fun, of course, and then I served with Ken for many years when he was in the state Senate and I was in the state Assembly.
Very good. Well, we look forward to hearing a little bit more about that. You know, as a member of the House of Representatives, you have a lot of different responsibilities. You know, talk about what does a member of Congress do, just for our viewers on the program
Well,
today.
you know, Mike Pence once told me that the only thing that a congressman is actually required to do is to vote. Everything else is a choice. So what bills you introduce, what services you provide to the district, all of that is a choice. But essentially we have two roles. One is representative, that's in the title. We represent the people that we serve, and that is certified every 2 years by their vote. We cast the votes according to our conscience, our best lights, the principles that we hold, and the promises that we've made to our constituency, and then they hold us accountable. And if we are no longer representing them, they'll find somebody else who does. And then the other thing is we have a very important ombudsman function, and that's where the district offices play such a huge role. The ombudsman function is essentially to help constituents in their close encounters with the various federal agencies. And this is something that I try to emphasize wherever I can. If you're having a close encounter with the federal agency, the IRS, the VA, the State Department, you're trying to get a passport, you've got an immigration issue, whatever it is, you don't have to face that bureaucracy alone. Call our office, and there are ways that we can help. Can't tell the bureaucracy what to do, but we can make sure that you have ample access to the process, that you're getting the attention you deserve, and then that you're getting a fair shake.
Now, you alluded to this earlier a little bit when you were telling the story about campaigning for Ken Maddy. You served with him in the legislature. You served in the California legislature for a number of years. Right. You've served in Congress for a number of years, and we had one of your colleagues on a previous program, Congressman Jim Costa, who talked a little bit about how he's seen the institutions evolve and change over time. And I'm curious, you know, obviously he had a Democratic perspective, but I'm curious from a Republican perspective, you know, how have you seen the institutions, the state legislature and Congress change over the time you've served?
Well, the mood has certainly changed, but that's not a question of institutional structure. That's a question of reflecting the country and reflecting the state. This is a representative democracy. You know, I tell folks all the time that the debates that go on in Washington, D.C. are simply a reflection of the much larger debate that goes on every day in this country over backyard fences and family dinner tables and coffee at Starbucks. That's the real debate, and things have become much more partisan, much more divided in the country over those decades. And so you see that reflected in Congress, and you see that reflected in the legislature. The process itself is sound, the institutions are sound, but we Americans are dealing with two very, very different visions of the future. One is freedom and the other is socialism. Lincoln, in his famous House Divided speech, noted that a house divided against itself cannot stand. He said this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. He says, I do not expect the government to dissolve. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It must become all one thing or all the other. He understood that there were two incompatible, antithetical principles vying for the future, freedom and slavery. And ultimately, only one could prevail because they're polar opposites. And so things obviously got very intense in that period. I think today that wheel's come full circle, and those two antithetical principles are freedom and socialism. In fact, if you think about it, socialism and slavery sprang from exactly the same poisonous principle that Lincoln described as being the same spirit that says, you work and toil and make bread, and I will eat it. So those principles ultimately can't be compromised. We have a system that is based upon political compromise, and so you have a period of very intense debate as we sort these two incompatible principles through and decide which path we're going to take. So I think that's what's actually going on. I think that's why you see things so partisan, not just in the Congress and the legislature, but among the American people.
We'll definitely dive into some of those issues shortly, but we're going to take a quick break. Up next, we'll talk more with Congressman Tom McClintock about some of the issues that are facing his district and also at the national level. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. We're talking with Congressman Tom McClintock, who represents California's 5th Congressional District. Congressman, thanks again for joining us.
Again, my pleasure.
Let's start, talking a little bit about some of the local issues that face your district. You have a rather vast district that extends across many counties. What are some of the top issues that are facing your district right now?
Well, that's why I serve on the Natural Resources Committee and have chaired both the committees on federal lands and water and power. Basically, it's fire and water. Management of our forests, which has been abandoned because of environmental laws that were passed in the 1970s that have made it endlessly time-consuming and ultimately cost-prohibitive to properly manage our forests. So they have become densely overgrown. I mean, an unmanaged forest is no different than an unmanaged garden. It will grow until it chokes itself to death, and then it will succumb to disease, pestilence, drought, and ultimately catastrophic wildfire. That's how nature gardens. We hired the Forest Service back at the turn of the 20th century in order to do a little gardening. Nature doesn't care that it takes hundreds of years for a forest to grow back. We mortals do. So we had federal foresters go into the forest every year. They would mark off the surplus timber. We'd then auction that timber off to logging companies that would actually pay us to remove that excess timber. The result was we had thriving, fire-resistant, resilient forests, and we also had a booming local economy because of all the jobs that provided. Well, these environmental laws that now require about 4.5 years of studies before you can do a forest thinning project. They cost millions of dollars. that's actually more than the timber that we're removing is worth. So instead of making us money, it costs us money. Not a lot of it gets done. We're now carrying 4 times the timber density in the mountains that the lands can support. And the result is we're losing our forest to catastrophic fire. It's not altogether complicated. As I said, that's how nature gardens. All of that excess timber will either come out one way or another. It's either carried out or nature will burn it out. And that's the choice that we have. Now, we did get legislation back in 2016 in the Wind Act for the Tahoe Basin that actually cut through a lot of that red tape and reduced the study time from 4.5 years to about 4 months. It reduced the environmental reports from about 800 pages down to a few dozen. The result is we've tripled the acreage treated in the Tahoe Basin. We've gone from 1 million board feet harvested a year off the federal lands to 9 million board feet, and that's what saved the city of South Lake Tahoe during the Caldor fire. We've got to extend that throughout the entire Forest Service system. We have now lost 27% of our federal forests over the past 10 years to catastrophic fire because of laws that promise to improve the environment and instead have proven themselves to be catastrophic. And those same laws are also what have impeded our ability to build new reservoirs and dams to meet the needs of a population the size of California's. The amount of time and money that it takes now for these studies makes these projects basically cost ineffective, and so nothing's happened. So the last time we had a major reservoir opened in this state, over 1 million acre feet, was in New Melones in 1979. In the meantime, the population has doubled. Droughts are nature's fault, but water shortages are our fault, and it's the very same laws, and we've got to overhaul them. So that's what I've been doing an awful lot of work on over the years, and I think we are making some progress. We've got to break that, well, that log jam. No pun intended.
Well, that's the, I definitely want to get into, some of the specific things that you're working on in a little bit later in the program, but how, you mentioned, that provision in the Wind Act, and I'm sure, a lot of these things take time to move through Congress. How do you get something through?
It's agonizing. It is absolutely agonizing.
The machinations of Congress.
That's the design of the system, though, and it's sound for an important reason. If the founders wanted a great big food fight when a law was being made, the legislative branch is the decision-making branch of the federal government. The executive branch simply is designed to carry out the decisions made by the legislative branch. So they wanted the subject held up to every conceivable angle. They wanted every voice in the country to be heard. They wanted a great big fight. They wanted it to be very hard to make a new law. But once that law was made, then its enforcement passed to a single individual with the energy and focus to actually enforce those laws and carry them out, and that, of course, is the presidency. So that's part of the design, but I have to tell you, it is very frustrating. But also, again, I think we're as a nation, I think we're awaiting a consensus among the American people over which direction they want to take, and we're in kind of a limbo right now until that happens. It may happen in this election.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about the Congressman's priorities in the House. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. We're here with Congressman Tom McClintock talking a little bit about his service in the House of Representatives and some of his priorities in Congress. Congressman, we talked a little bit about some of the key issues facing your district in the last segment, but I want to build on that and, really kind of identify what are some pieces of legislation that you're currently working on? What are some things that you're currently doing in the House of Representatives to be able to work on some of those priorities that you mentioned?
Well, I mentioned the forest legislation that I'm carrying. I also have a one-stop shop to basically streamline the permitting process for new dam construction that's desperately needed. We got it out of the House of Representatives in a prior session. But again, I'm afraid that legislation, as it leaves the House and goes over to the Senate, runs into an insurmountable obstacle called the environmental lobby. And as I said, they promised us environmental improvements, and all they delivered is the decimation of our forests and the desiccation of our agricultural lands. But that's my focus locally. As you know, I'm also the chairman of the Immigration Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee, so all of the immigration legislation that the House has passed, including and especially H.R. 2, most of that comes through my subcommittee, and a lot of that is what I wrote. H.R. 2 is the measure that passed the House last year. It basically restores and mandates the policies that the Trump administration used to bring illegal border crossings to a 41-year low. It restores the Remain in Mexico policy that had brought phony asylum claims to a trickle. It mandates completion of the border wall. And it mandates the deportation the execution of deportation orders by the courts, which are all things that the Biden administration stopped the very first day of office and produced the largest illegal mass migration in history.
I want to get a little bit more into that. Some of the key issues that are facing Congress, immigration is certainly one of them, and you play a big role as chairman. Looking a little bit about that, do you foresee it being, solved in the next Congress? I know you're currently running for re-election. I mean, do you think it's going to be solved in the next Congress, or what are some of the contingent factors that depend upon trying to fix this crisis?
Well, obviously it's going to require the American people demanding it, and that's what elections are all about. But what we did find during the Trump years is that the laws that we currently have in place are adequate to secure our borders. In fact, when I was meeting with a group of Border Patrol agents in Yuma last year, I said, look, we're the legislative branch. We write laws. We can't enforce them. What laws do you need us to write to make your jobs easier? And unanimously, they said, we don't need new laws. We need to enforce our existing laws. When I was at Eagle Pass in Texas early this year, the chief of the Border Patrol unit there said, look, I am standing in front of an open fire hydrant with a bucket. I don't need more buckets. I need somebody to turn off the hydrant. And that's the great frustration. So ultimately, the immediate crisis can only be solved by an executive branch, a president, who's actually determined to secure our borders, as Donald Trump did. That's an issue that will be on the ballot in less than 10 weeks. Once we've secured our borders, then we have to look at the overall immigration system, what can be done to improve that. But until we enforce our existing laws, adopting new laws is meaningless. Without enforcing our immigration laws, we have no immigration laws. If we have no immigration laws, we have no border. And if we have no border, we don't have a country. We just have this now vast international territory between Canada and Mexico. No country has survived without securing its borders. And that's a lesson that history is screaming at our country right now.
We only have a few seconds left, but you're running for re-election. What's next on your agenda in office when you're looking ahead at, in the House of Representatives, if you're re-elected? I mean, what do you plan to focus on?
The most beautiful words in the English language are on our Liberty Bell. They come from the King James version of the Bible, Leviticus. Proclaim liberty throughout all the world and unto all the inhabitants thereof. That's ultimately the real question that we are resolving as Americans. As I said at the beginning of our interview, freedom or socialism. Those are two very, very different paths. The entire history of human civilization can be summed up in just 4 words. Freedom works, socialism sucks. Freedom invariably produces the happiest, most prosperous, most just, most powerful, most envied societies in human history. And socialism always produces misery, poverty. I mean, look at where socialism has taken root in our own cities, of our own states, including California, and around the world. You see exactly the same political and economic pathologies. You see failing schools, shortages of basic necessities like electricity, gasoline, groceries, housing. You ultimately see sky-high taxes, rampant crime, rising homelessness, and ultimately failing businesses and fleeing families. We've watched that take over cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. We've seen it destroying states like our own California, and now we're watching that same debate playing out nationally. So what's in my future? It's the question, the ultimate question that the American people are going to have to decide in our generation. And upon that decision rests the question, as Lincoln put it, whether we will nobly save or meanly lose this, the last best hope of mankind on this earth.
Well, Congressman, I'm afraid that's all the time we have, but it's a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into the Maddy Report. To learn more about the Maddy Institute, visit maddyinstitute.com. We'll see you next week. What makes a community thrive? How do we bridge the gap between government and policy and the people it impacts? The Maddy Institute was founded to answer questions like these, to create a link between government and the citizens it serves, and to inspire a new generation of leaders dedicated to public service. In 1999, the California legislature unanimously established the Maddy Institute in honor of former California State Senator Kenneth L. Maddy. Senator Maddy was widely respected for his commitment to bipartisan solutions and his dedication to the people of California's Central Valley. Known for his ability to work across the aisle, Senator Maddy believed that effective government begins with respectful dialogue, evidence-based policy, and a commitment to the common good. Today, the Maddy Institute continues his legacy. Our mission is threefold. 1, to promote more effective and inclusive government. 2, to encourage civic engagement. And 3, to conduct research on key issues impacting the Central Valley. Through these efforts, we aim to educate, inspire, and empower the next generation of public servants and community leaders. One of the most impactful ways we fulfill this mission is through our internship programs. Each year, the Maddy Institute provides opportunities for students from the Central Valley to work in legislative offices, both in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., as well as local government agencies. These internships give students real-world experience in policymaking, allow them to see government in action, and help them build the skills they need to make a difference in their communities. But the Maddy Institute isn't just for students. Through our civic engagement programs, we create opportunities for everyone to participate in the political process. From community forums to workshops, we bring people together to discuss important issues facing the Central Valley, like water management, air quality, economic development, and education. These events foster open dialogue, allowing citizens to engage directly with policymakers, experts, and others, creating a stronger and more informed community. And to ensure the public stays informed, the Maddy Institute produces the Maddy Report, a weekly public affairs broadcast that covers the latest issues impacting California. Each episode features interviews with lawmakers, journalists, and subject matter experts, providing insights and analysis on topics that matter to our region. Whether it's understanding new legislation or exploring solutions to local challenges, the Maddy Report is a trusted source of information for those who want to stay engaged. At the heart of everything we do is a belief that good governance
requires an informed and engaged public. From nurturing young leaders to fostering dialogue, the Maddy Institute is dedicated to creating a future where the people of the Central Valley can thrive. Join us as we continue Senator Maddy's legacy. Together, we can build a brighter future, one informed and engaged citizen at a time.
The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about today's episode of the Maddy Report, please visit our website at maddyinstitute.com.